A very good afternoon to everyone. A warm welcome to all the participants who've joined us this afternoon for this wonderful session on email etiquettes. Uh, to begin with, we all know it is very, very easy to write an email, whether it is in the middle of a busy day or on the go from your phones. In some cases, we may need to write numerous emails per day as required by our work, right? And sending an email, may be a simple and an effective way to communicate, but there are several rules that needs to be followed to ensure that we are communicating professionally and to avoid any mistakes that can lead to embarrassment or worse. Now, today we have a very, very special guest, a special speaker with us, Sanjeev Varma, who is going to take us through this journey of, how do you write a good email? How do you write emails professionally? And is going to talk about a lot of other do's and don'ts as well.
Good afternoon, Shiva. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us and agreeing to do this for us. Over to you.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen with you and we will begin. So, welcome to this webinar. Email etiquette is what I'm going to talk about. We have 90 minutes starting now and ending at 5 o'clock. So without much ado, I shall begin. So here's how it's going to happen. I'm going to do a brief introduction. I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. Then we'll talk about email etiquette. It's the central part of what we're doing this afternoon. I'll talk for about 45 to 46 minutes. And then I'm going to give you 25 do's and don'ts of email writing, which will be sort of a rapid fire manner. I'll cover it in about 20 minutes. We leave 15 minutes for any questions that you may have, although I expect that once I've finished, you'll find that I've answered all your questions, or so I think. And then at the end, we'll have about 4 minutes of feedback and conclusion. So that's how we're going to do it. I'm going to give you very quickly a little brief about myself. Sanjeev Varma is the name. I'm a writer and broadcaster. I graduated from Delhi University. I was a visiting fellow at the University of Cambridge in UK in 2001. The subject of my study was media studies. I'm passionate about what I like to call the good things of life: cinema, classical Western music, travel. And there are two kinds of people in the world: those who eat to live and those who live to eat. So I live to eat. So I'm a foodie. I'm under contract with Macmillan India for authoring 2 books on Indian cinema and on Indian cuisine. These are some of the organizations that I've worked with. All India Radio and Doordarshan is where I started my career. I was a newsreader on television in the late 1980s and early 90s. Then I moved to the print media, the Sunday Observer, Business India magazine. Then my corporate career, I worked with Satyam Infoway. I was the content head for them. Then I worked for an insurance company, life insurance, Max New York Life. I worked for Dell. I worked for Moser, Reliance Power. And in the year 2017, I set up my own small boutique consultancy, which is called Lexis Consultants. We work on communication remits, but primarily what I do is I conduct writing skills workshops. So let's talk about email writing. So even more than other forms of writing, email writing creates strong, vivid, almost indelible impressions. So, as human beings, we are very judgmental. So you meet somebody for the first time, you form an impression about that person, how the person talks, how the person looks, and so on. And that first impression that you form is very difficult to shake off. Once you form that first impression, it stays with you. That's how email creates an impact on the recipient. depending on how you've written the email, whether there are spelling errors in it, if there's a grammar problem in it, that's something that's going to stay with me. So even though we may know each other over a period of time, that first impression that I've got about your email will always stay with me. So it's important that we use email to create and strengthen our image. And these are things that you can, there are a whole lot of things that you can steer clear of to be a good email communicator. And many of these things I'm going to talk about further down the presentation. Emails, I like to say, are ephemeral. Ephemeral is a word that means fleeting, something that lasts for a very short time. So you could be working on your laptop and you'll get an email notification, which will pop up on your screen for a few seconds. And even as you're looking at it, it'll fade from the view. So it's like a footprint in the sand. So you go to a beach and you see your own footprint, but soon a wave comes and washes it away and you can't see it anymore. Emails are a little bit like that. They pop up on your screen and in a snap, they're gone. So you can't waste time. You must grab attention and deal with the email. So either an email rapidly communicates, or if you ignore it, it fails to communicate. And having said that emails are ephemeral, I'm going to say the exact opposite now, that emails are permanent. And they're permanent in the sense that they will stay in your inbox for years, even decades. And they will stay there until such time that you seek to delete that particular email in your inbox. So I created my first email account in the year 1997, or was it 98? I think it was 98. And there was this email service called USA.net, net address. I created my first account there. I still have that account 24 years later. And I still have the first email that I ever wrote 24 years ago. The first email that I wrote, I still have it in my sent items. I won't tell you who I wrote it to, but it is there in my sent items. So unless you actively seek to delete an email, it will stay there. Hence, it's a permanent record of your writing prowess or the lack of it. Now, email is not a document. This is very important. The two things, they deliver information differently. And because they deliver information so differently, they have to be written differently. So the one on the left is a document with long reams of text, long paragraph, dense text. But the one on the right is an email. And this is an email that I wrote just yesterday, I think it was. There's somebody I met earlier in the week, a very fine gentleman from the Indian Army, a retired brigadier. I met him and he asked me to send him 1 or 2 articles that I recently wrote for business leaders. So I write thought leadership articles for business leaders too. And I'd written 1 or 2 recently, and he wanted to read one of those. So I sent it to him. And this is the sort of 3-4 sentences that I wrote to him a couple of days ago. So from layout to sentence pattern and from paragraphs to vocabulary changes, documents and emails have to be dealt with differently. In emails, you always refrain from writing long, ponderous text. You divvy the text into small bites. You make it palatable. You present information in small bites. Now, email is always about courtesy and decorum. Always. There's no exception. We all like people who are polite and courteous. In email communication, these 2 elements, courtesy and decorum, are non-negotiable. I'm talking, of course, of business email writing. Personal emails, the same rules may or may not apply. But in business emails, you're always courteous and you maintain decorum. If you're being provoked even, I would suggest you tame your anger and displeasure and grin and bear it, and don't write in anger. If you do feel a sense of anger, sleep over it, look at it the next morning and you'll find that anger is dissipated, and you will not write an angry email. Let your subject line talk. This is absolutely critical when it comes to email writing. Subject lines matter. Research shows that 53% recipients open emails on the basis of the subject line. So if you've forgotten to include a subject line in your email and you've sent it, chances are your email will not be read. So you need to think, deliberate a little bit, and come up with 3 or 5 or 7 words that capture the essence of your email and create a subject line. So you need to create urgency in your subject line, but never type that line hurriedly, because it matters, and it matters a great deal. So you need to come up with a subject line which captures the essence of what you're trying to say. Well begun is half done. This is a bit of a cliche. You say that anything that you begin well, you're likely to do well over a period of time. In an email, this is absolutely critical. So say what you want to say now, the first sentence, in fact, the very first word. Don't waffle, don't dilly-dally, don't talk about non-essentials. Just come to the point straight away. The beginning and the end of each email creates a lasting, almost an everlasting impression about you, and that's why it matters. So carefully craft the opening of your email, and that's the key. There's a technique which is called Skim and Scam technique. It enables the recipient of your email to cut through the clutter. Now, basically what it means is that it enables the recipient of your email to leave out the unnecessary information so that the necessary information stands out. So just as an example, if my travel agent has written an email to me, and there's a particular trip that I've asked him to book for me, a business trip, the first thing I want to know is how much it's going to cost me. The email should be written in a way that information stands out. There are other matters of detail, the itinerary and so on. But the first thing I want to know is how much it's going to cost me. And it should be written in a way, it should be highlighted, maybe with a bullet point, maybe in bold or whatever it is. But I want that information before everything else. Busy people look for necessary information in an email, and they ignore the non-essential items. So you should write your email in a manner that enables the recipient to skim and scan. White matters, and I'm not being racist. I'm not saying white people matter and non-whites don't. I'm saying that white space, when it comes to an email, is full of meaning. So don't fill up your screen with lots of text. Busy eyes need relief. When I'm reading a document, or if I'm reading an email on my computer screen, my eyes seek relief. So if you've covered it with dense text, my eyes are going to get tired very soon. So don't use dense blocks of text. Use white space inventively. After writing every 2 lines, press the paragraph break. It just gives busy eyes relief. Salutations matter. They are very important, but you need to keep them simple. In business emails, you must always maintain an appropriate level of formality. So you can write, "Dear Mr. Agarwal," unless you are on first name basis with him, in which case you can write, "Dear Sushil." These are Ethica examples that I've picked up, as Shiva will appreciate. Likewise, you can say, "Dear Miss Navneeta," or if you know her well and are on first name terms, you can say, "Dear Navneeta." A comma or a colon after the name is important in business emails. Usually it's a comma that we say. So I'll write, for instance, "Dear Shiva," and followed by a comma. In the United States, they use a colon. And on one of my trips to the United States, I asked a journalist friend who knows about these things, why a colon, why not a comma? And what he said to me is very interesting. And I sometimes use a colon, although I'm too used to a comma. The answer was that a colon brings immediacy. That you are not going to spend any time on non-essentials and nonsense, and you want to get to the point straight away, and a colon suggests that. So I find that very interesting. So whether it's a comma or a colon, when you're writing the name of a person, a comma or a colon can follow, must follow, in fact. Now, there's no need for this stream of consciousness writing. And I've put a couple of examples here. One example, the same thing we're saying in two different ways. Just give me a minute. Sorry, I needed to do this. My screen was getting covered a little bit. So the email on the left, let me read it out. Anita, you gave me a copy of an article a couple of weeks ago when we had lunch at the Big Chill. You know, that day my car broke down and I had to take the metro, so I was late and you almost left. Can't remember exactly what it was, something from Chandra Times of India, or maybe Business Standard. All I remember is that it was one of our competitors talking about a new product. Anyway, it is significant because reading it will be helpful for the meeting that we have on Friday at the Grand Hyatt. I've been looking for it, but have not been able to find it in my briefcase or even anywhere at home. What I was wondering was whether you'd mind sending me a copy. Thanks a lot. And I really enjoyed our lunch. The purpose of the email is buried in the second last sentence. I want another copy. And that is why I've written this email, but I've drowned it in all sorts of unnecessary information. On the right, would you mind sending me another copy of the article about our competitor's new product that you gave me when we had lunch at the Big Chill? So it has the purpose of the email and it has a little context. I seem to have lost it, and it is important that I read it before the upcoming meeting. Thanks a lot. I really enjoyed our lunch. So all this nonsense about car breaking down and not being able to find briefcase or whatever it is, completely irrelevant information. So you just get down to the purpose of the email right up front when you write emails. Email salutations and sign off. Salutations, the one I like the best is saying dear, followed by the person's name. So appropriate level of formality, Mr., Mrs., or Miss, MS. Actually, for women, I always use MS. So if men of the world are all MRs, women of the world must all be MS. There's no particular reason why the marital status of a woman should be important. So Mrs. people write, or Miss if they're unmarried, and I don't think it's necessary. Or you can just write the person's name, let's say Anita. Hi is okay, hey is not, hey is informal, hi is all right. And don't say dearie and dearest. These sort of intimate markers are only for personal emails, not business emails. And we're talking about business emails. Signing off, you can write yours sincerely, yours faithfully. They're very, very, very formal. So the best thing that I do, what I always do is just write regards and my name, and that's it. You can also say best regards, kind regards, and so on. Americans write just best. They don't write regards. They just say best, comma, and they sign their name. And what it means is that best of everything for you for the day ahead. This is one of the techniques to get to the point straight away when you're writing an email. So mention the reason why you're writing. This email is to, and then you go on to say what you have to. Or I'm writing to, and you state your objective. I'm pleased to, I'd be pleased if you, could you please? So what it does is it brings you immediately to the purpose why you're writing the mail. I very often do this. Just a quick note to remind you that we are meeting tomorrow. So just a quick note. I'm not saying how are you, how's the state of the world, what's happening, what's the weather like outside. All those things are completely unnecessary. So just get to the point straight away. Just a quick note too, and you state the purpose. I'm sorry to inform you, unfortunately. So if it's a negative thing that you have to say, still you get to the point straight away. So these are just some indicators which if you use, you will get to the point right away. Attaching and enclosing documents, we must state explicitly in our mails that the mail contains an attachment. There is an icon that that the recipient will see, but it's important to also say that you're attaching a document. Many people read emails very quickly and they may not see the icon. So say I'm attaching or I enclose, but and you can also write please find enclosed, though it's overly formal, but it is correct grammatically, it's right. So you can say please find enclosed, but don't leave out the word enclosed. So don't say please find. And then here's an example. So I get e-paper, Indian Express. I've subscribed to it and I get their e-paper edition every morning. And even a newspaper of great repute like Indian Express, they make this very basic mistake. It says, good morning, and this smiley. Please find the digital version of the Delhi edition of the Indian Express for 23rd November 2022. It should have said, please find enclosed or please find attached. Please find the digital version. What it means is that they're saying to me in the morning, now please get up from your bed and please find the digital version of our newspaper, which is ridiculous. My answer to this is, no, I won't do it. You find it and you send it to me. So, that's, I hope you see the point that I'm making. Eliminate the fluff, just the basics. So I wrote this email just yesterday, I think it was. Dear Brunalini, just a quick note to confirm that I'm coming to Bangalore on the 5th of December and will be in your city for 3 days. I hope we can meet to discuss your content requirements for next year. Please let me know what date and time would suit you. Regards, and my name. That's all that you want to achieve writing the email, and there's no particular reason to write, how's life and what's happening, and all that fluff. Just get down to basics. No fluff and also no frills. Cut out emotional frills from your emails. This is something that I like to say, that hello, how are you today? A lot of people begin their emails by saying that. I hope this email finds you in the best of health and that sort of thing. It's a very friendly marker. It's a nice thing to say. But unless you're expecting the recipient of your email to answer your question, there's no particular reason to ask the question. If the question is going to be ignored, why have you asked the question? So I am, of course, a stickler for some of these things. So a friend of mine recently sent me an email saying, hi, Sanjeev, so how's life and what's happening? So I decided to answer the question. So I said, India lost in the semifinals of the T20 World Cup, and unfortunately, the World Cup in football is about to begin. And I went to a restaurant yesterday, and it rained. And he called me after that, and he said, "Have you gone mad? I mean, why are you saying all this to me?" I said, "Because you asked me how are things, what's happening. So I decided to tell you what's happening." So unless you expect the question to be answered, there's no particular reason to ask it. Just get to the point. Business email correspondence is about facts. A straightforward, factual tone sends the message that you are a no-nonsense person, and that you and that sort of image brings with it a certain image of reliability. Too many emotional words and phrases might bring your work into question. So if you're trying to be very pally with somebody and have a lot of things like "let's meet soon" and "I love meeting you," and effusive language like that, it might actually bring your professionalism into question, which is why it's avoidable. Away from my desk. I know that most of us use out-of-office notifications. If I'm going to be on leave for a couple of days, I will activate an out-of-office notification. In the US, and many of these email trends emerge from the United States, When I'd gone to the US in the early 2000s, I've gone there many times since, but at that time, I found that people were using this not out of office, but away from my desk. And I loved it. So even if you're going to be away from your desk for a couple of hours, people in the US activate this notification. So don't expect me to reply straight away because I'm away from my desk for 2 hours. So it's something that I've used ever since. The language of this notification can be, hello, I'm away from my desk between November 14 and 26, both days included. Your email will be saved and read upon my return. If you have a pressing need, please contact Anita Jalwal. Anita is my colleague at Lexis. So I've given her email ID and I've given her phone number. And this is an automatic email that gets generated the moment an email hits my inbox, if I've activated this away from my desk or out of office. When it comes to emails, long and complex is bad. Short and simple does the job. Always, there's no exception. So business email is about simplicity and directness. Business writers of every stripe, they make a common mistake. They fall for the bait that lofty vocabulary and impressive long sentences demonstrate professional competence and intellectual sophistication. Nothing could be further from the truth. Good communication is about simplicity. You write to express. You don't write to impress. If you're writing to impress, you're bound to fail. If you write to express, you will succeed. So just don't try to impress with your vocabulary and writing mighty sentences. It doesn't work. And I've said no in about 10 different languages to make the point. Such language is almost always dreadful. In business writing, it is a stumbling block to information exchange. Parading knowledge will always fail. Email is a synonym for action. So almost always business professionals open emails to find out what action they have to take. You sent me an email. I instantly want to know what it is that you want from me. Why have you written to me? And that one piece of information must be obvious to me straight away. So what decision needs to be made to answer a question? These are some of the reasons why you would have written the email. What decision needs to be made to answer a question, deal with the situation and set it right, maybe to set up a face-to-face meeting or to review a draft. The purpose of your email must be apparent to me as soon as I open your email, which is why I like to say that it should be the first sentence of your email. So just a quick note to ask you if you're available for a meeting tomorrow. I know exactly why you've written the mail. I don't have to search through 400 words that you've written after that. I'll just read the first sentence and I'll know what it is that you're trying to achieve. Jargon. Slangs, acronyms, abbreviations, jargon, technical terms. It's best to keep them out of email writing. Jargon is about selective inclusion. And so most industries, in the case of Ethica, you are in the insurance space. The financial services space will have its own jargon. And if you're writing to somebody else in the insurance space, that jargon is going to be familiar to that person as well. So maybe you can use that jargon. But it's best not to assume that the jargon that you're using is something that everybody is familiar with. In email communication particularly, which is why you must de-jargonize your writing. So a couple of examples I put here. M&A, mergers and acquisition, it's a common abbreviation, and perhaps most people will understand, but there can be people who wonder what M&A is, so why use it? There's an acronym when I worked for Dell, EMEA, 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 which is Europe, Middle East, and Africa. In Dell, it was a very big thing. I mean, there was a whole sort of department named after EMEA. So everyone in the company, and there were some 10, 12,000 people, everyone knew what EMEA was. But as soon as I left Dell, I joined another company. Nobody knew what EMEA was there. So there's no point in using abbreviations and acronyms which are unfamiliar to people. GDP is all right generally because everyone knows what GDP is, gross domestic product. But things like COB or COB is close of business. COB can also mean chief of bureau. So if I have a journalistic background, I work for a newspaper, COB means chief bureau, but you mean close of business. Or LIFO, last in, first out. These are not abbreviations that you should use. And unless you're writing to a finance whiz kid, don't talk about D2E, direct to employer, and things like that. Contractions work well in emails. So the usual thing is that in business writing, you don't use contractions. So you don't say, I will not, you don't say, I won't. But when it comes to business emails, you actually should use contractions because email is direct and snappy, and therefore it favors contractions. So you can say I'll rather than I will. He is, he apostrophe S rather than he is, or she would rather than say she would, you can say she apostrophe D. Contractions also emphasize urgency. Business documents, on the other hand, they require a great deal of formality. Emails don't. Contractions are more emphatic and urgent, and they're associated also with fluency. So every time saying I would like in email communication is not as effective as saying I'd like. Questions kindle the reader's interest. Now, it's an old communication technique, and it's ideally suited to email writing. It also establishes your authority. So the reader must read to find the answer. So why not begin your email with a question? If your reader can't adequately answer your question, it puts your knowledge and authority in limelight. So you're asking questions of people that you're writing to. So ask a question that arouses curiosity. Have you heard about the latest IRDAI stipulation? And it arouses my curiosity. What is it? I mean, do I know about the stipulation? I want to know about it. So I'll ask you, no, tell me about it. Or if I know about it, we'll get into a discussion over it. So questions kindle interest. And remember this. Once you hit that send button, you must assume there's no way to stop your email from being sent. Now, many attempts have been made, but no one has quite cracked how to recall an email sent prematurely. So my tip is, if you're writing an important message, fill the email address last. That way you can't accidentally send the message before you're ready. It happens to all of us. Just the other day, I was typing an important message, and I don't know how, but my finger clicked send, and the email went, and it was only half complete. And it can be embarrassing because you come across as somebody a little bit amateurish. So so if you fill the email address field last, this will never happen. And should something like this happen, apologize. Make it appropriate for the situation, for something which is small and a very sort of elementary slip up. You can say a quick sorry about that, and that's sufficient. But for a bigger mistake, choose your words more thoughtfully or apologize face to face. And what happens is that we are all, human beings are curious, generally curious. So a curious cat, you've heard of the curious cat. Human beings are curious. So curiosity killed the cat, we say, is a bit of a cliche. If I get an email in my inbox, which then, it is followed up with another email which says, I recall my previous message or some such thing, I will naturally want to know what it is that you wrote which persuaded you to recall the email. So it will actually only ensure that I read your email, which you don't want me to read. So it's best to own up and say that you made a mistake, apologize for it, and move on with your life. Okay, so Shiva, shall we do the poll now? Based on some of the things that I've said, we've designed 3 or 4 or I think 5 questions, and Shiva will tell you what you need to do.
Yes, Sanjeev. The poll is available for all the participants right now on their screens. Please take a minute to fill in your answers, and then we'll discuss the answers shortly. Sanjeev, we have the responses on screen for share with everyone.
Okay. So the first question, what does the E in email stand for? It stands for electronic mail. I put these slightly wayward things just to confuse you a little bit, but clearly I failed in my effort. So 92% said electronic mail, and that's correct. Why must you never write an email in all caps? You don't write emails in all caps because it is considered equivalent to shouting. And it also makes what you've written difficult to read. And that's the reason you don't write in all caps. So all the other responses, it makes the email longer and so on. That's not true. It just is considered rude and it amounts to shouting. That's why you don't write an email in all caps. And a little bit later, I'll tell you 1 or 2 stories about this too. So we go on further to the next questions. Can I do that, or you'll be doing it, Shiva?
We are on the 3rd question, Sanjeev.
Oh, I can't see it. Okay, yeah. Okay, so here's the 3rd question. What should the subject line of an email contain? So nothing is definitely not okay because subject line is optional. That's not true. I told you that 53% people, when they receive an email without a subject line, they don't open it. So a sentence, a short descriptive phrase, which is between 3 to 7 words, and it captures the essence of your email, is what a subject line should contain, not a full sentence that describes the reason for writing the mail, a short descriptive phrase. It could be 2 words, it could be 3 or 4 or 5. More than 5 in certain situations, maybe it's warranted, but by and large, no. When should you pay attention to spelling and grammar in an email message? Always, regardless of who you're writing to, you must always pay attention to grammar and correct spelling. If you've written something and you've managed to misspell 1 or 2 words in the opening sentence, it gives me an impression about somebody who's careless. And that's not the impression that you want to give to the recipient of your email, that you're a careless person. Those were the 4 questions. Anything else, Shiva? These are
no, Sanjeev. I think we can move forward.
Yeah. Okay. So looking at the time, it's 4:10. So I've actually gone very fast with what I wanted to say, because I do see that there are more than 650 participants, and I expect there will be some questions, and I certainly want the session to be interactive, and I'm sure Shiva does too. So can we remove the poll from the screen?
It is moved. Poll is not active.
Okay, I still have it on my screen. So let me just fix that. Okay, yeah. Okay. So it's coming up to 4:15. We have 45 minutes left. I'm going to say a few more things, and then we'll talk about do's and don'ts. So before what follows, I want you to consider this. With business email, you can firmly establish your company as a professional enterprise and yourself as a proficient individual who's going to be professional as well as genial, somebody pleasant to deal with. Email is often the first point of contact when two professionals are getting to know each other. You have an opportunity to make a great first impression. You need to nail that opportunity to gain trust and confidence in yourself and your organization. Careless emails are a big deal because they demean your intelligence and integrity. Don't let that happen. There are some simple do's and don'ts, and I've put together 25 of them. We have a little more time perhaps available, so I will spend maybe 20-25 minutes talking about do's and don'ts, and then we'll open to questions. So here's the first of the 25. Use the subject line. Many of these things I may have referred to earlier, but in this case, repetition is perfectly all right because these are things that I want you to take away from this session. These are the things that you should or should not do when writing emails. Use the subject line. Never send an email with the subject line blank. I said research shows recipients may not open an email which has no subject line. So you need to tell the recipient what your email is about, 3 to 5 words or 7 if needed, informative yet concise. If you're forwarding another email with an unclear subject line, write afresh. A clear subject line enables the recipient to save your communication to the appropriate folder. There are a lot of people who are very organized in the way they treat their emails. They create folders and subfolders. And if your email has just the right descriptive subject line, it enables the recipient to save the email to the right folder. Break paragraphs with a line of space. The paragraph is the humble workhorse of communication. You need to use it for emails. Neat paragraphs make emails easier to read. 2 or 3, or perhaps 4 paragraphs at the most, and not more than 2 or 3 sentences per paragraph. That's the general rule. And every sentence, you usually have about 10 to 12 words. So 10 to 12 words per sentence, 2 or 3 sentences per paragraph, and not more than 2 or 3 paragraphs in an email. So that's roughly between 50 to 150 words in an email. Avoid special formatting in emails. Special formatting could be futile because people open emails using different software and different mail clients. So you could be using Microsoft Outlook or Lotus Notes, or you could be using Gmail. And people also look at emails on their iPads and their computers, or more likely they're not on their smartphones. And much of the formatting that you may have worked will be lost, and your mail may show up as all garbled, which is why formatting is usually avoided. Just write in simple text form, use one font, go easy even on things like bold and italics and underline, tabs, and special symbols. Just write simple text, one font, and send your email. Use attachments for formatted documents. There are, of course, some documents that you will send where formatting is important. These are like proposals or budgets or memos. And then in those cases, you should use attachments. You want people to be able to see charts and tables and outlines, summaries and the like. And you want them to be seen exactly how you laid them out. And that's only possible if you attach the formatted document. But don't inundate the recipient with attachments. So don't have like 6 attachments to a mail. I received an email the other day which had 5 or 6 attachments, and I dreaded the email because I didn't particularly want to open 6 different attachments to figure out which contained what. Clearly label your attachments. Use attachments sparingly, like I said, but if attachments are necessary, clearly label them, especially if you're sending more than one. It also allows, like I said, the recipient to clearly distinguish among documents and save them to appropriate folders. Don't reply all. Reply all. So you have two buttons. One says reply, another says reply all. Don't reply all. No need at all to copy 33 other people to say thank you to one person. Don't inflict that on me, please. If you are just saying thank you to Shiva and no thanks to me, then there's no particular reason for me to be marked on the mail. The reply all button is a convenience, but use it sparingly. Don't use it when you're correcting someone. It can be humiliating for the person who's being corrected. So if you've written something and I'm in response pointing out an error that you made, I don't want 33 other people to know that I've corrected you. So I should write only to you, even though those many people were marked in the original mail. Always trim the reply all list before hitting send. So always see who are the various people whose email IDs come up when you hit reply all. And you can trim the list before you send the email. Limit messages to a screen. Limit your message to a screen. Email is intended for brief and to the point communication. So the rule of thumb is the recipient shouldn't have to scroll down to read your email. The first screen that appears, whether I'm seeing it on a phone or my iPad or a laptop, I shouldn't have to scroll down to read all of your email. It should be there in that first screen. That's the rule of thumb. Of course, there are situations where it's not possible to write in 2 or 3 or 4 lines what you want to say. So in which case, of course, you'll write slightly longer emails. But by and large, most emails, 3-4 sentences are sufficient. If it must be a long email, consider using an attachment. Minimize replies that include previous messages. Avoid automatically sending back an entire message when you're replying. It puts unnecessary stress on email servers. In the early days of email communication in the late 90s and early 2000s, stress on email servers was a big issue. That threat has kind of abated now, but still when I speak to IT heads and so on, they still say that too many attachments and so on put a lot of load on servers, and it's not necessary. Use the entire thread only if it is necessary for the message to be understood. Use the edit feature to prune the message. If you're just forwarding an email, use the edit feature to cut out things that are not required. For instance, earlier signatures used in the thread, they're not required. You can edit them easily. Clean up messages before forwarding. And here I'm going to give you an example shortly. So forwarding a string of messages is a risky business. I will tell you how shortly. Delete things that the recipient does not need to see. Clean up the to subject, the CC, the subject line, and also the disclaimer language. And read every thread every time before you forward it. So I'm going to tell you what happened to me once. I worked for a company called Moser Bear, which is a media manufacturing company, and also was into power. I was the head of corporate communications for Moser Bear, group head of corporate communications, and we had an event coming up. And while we had a regular advertising agency, I wanted another agency to handle our event. So I asked for a pitch from 4 or 5, usually you ask 4 or 5 different agencies to make a pitch for a business. So I sent pitch letters to 5 advertising agencies asking them if they would like to handle this event that we had coming up. There's a young lady who worked with me, and she came and spoke to me and said, my brother used to work for Lintas Advertising. He's recently quit and he set up his own advertising agency. And is he eligible for making this pitch? I said, of course, he's eligible for making the pitch. And because he's your brother, he'll probably get preferential treatment because you work for Mozaber and it's your brother who set up an agency. If he's capable of handling this, he'll get preferential treatment. So of course, he should make a pitch. So what she did was this pitch mail that I had written to 5 different agencies, she forwarded it to her brother. But before forwarding it to her brother, she wrote 2 lines. And those 2 lines were that be very particular about grammar and spelling because Sanjeev is a nutcase, or some words to that effect, that he's very particular about language. And if you write poor language, he will get upset. Or words to that effect. And she sent the email. So when her brother, sent his proposal, he used the same thread and sent his proposal. Now, when I got the mail, I realized the same thread. So I started looking at, the entire thread. And I saw these 2 lines that my colleague had written about me. I was not offended at all because I do believe that I'm a fusspot. And I'm very particular about language, and I'm proud of it too. So I was not offended at all. But when my colleague realized what had happened, she was absolutely devastated and distraught. And she came into my room and apologized, and she wept. She said, "I'm so sorry," and she wept. I said, "What is this? What are you doing? I mean, it's okay. Nothing has happened. It's fine." And she said, no, it was terrible. I said those terrible things about you. I said, they're not terrible things. I am a fusspot. I am very, arrogant or whatever you'd written. So I am all those things and I'm proud of it. So don't worry about it. But it didn't work. She didn't come to the office for 2 or 3 days after that. And eventually about 2 or 3 weeks later, she quit and left the company. Now, I'm not saying that every time you forward a message like this, somebody is going to quit. So actually, the young lady has done extremely well for herself and followed her career. She's doing extremely well. So maybe she would have left anyway. She was planning to leave anyway. But because of this forwarding of a message with some things which were not required, I lost a valuable colleague, and so it can actually be fairly disastrous. So clean up messages before forwarding. Use the away from my desk notification. It is professionally wise to use this notification. It gives the email sender comfort that his or her communication is important and is being read. Specify the time you're going to be away from your desk. Specify the person to contact in your absence and include the contact details of that person. Use abbreviations judiciously. Make sure recipients will easily recognize whatever abbreviations and acronyms that you've used. So CEO, CFO, VP, these are abbreviations we are mostly familiar with. So perhaps they're all right. Even things like FYI and ASAP, for your information and as soon as possible, maybe they are fine too. I don't use them and I never will, but I'm a fusspot, right? So maybe it's all right to use those because they are widely understood. But writing docs for documents, info for information, congrats for congratulations is not okay. In business emails, it's not okay. In your personal communication, personal email, you can contract whatever you want and however you want. But in business email communication, don't write docs for documents and info for information and so on. Shun emoticons or emojis. They have no place in business writing at all. There's no need to be cute when you are when you are writing business emails. Business email is strictly professional and you must keep it so. Don't even use smileys. You must actually disable emoticons when you're writing business emails. Clearly line up your recipients. Decide who your email is addressed to directly and who's merely copied. The person you're addressing directly or the persons you're addressing directly, they go into the to field. CC stands for carbon copy, which basically means that you're not expecting a direct response from the person who's copied. It's only for the information of that person. So you put that person in CC. And avoid BCC as far as possible. BCC stands for blank carbon copy. It suggests something murky or clandestine. So if I get an email where I'm BCC'd and I press reply all, it will send the reply to everybody, and the game will be up. That I was marked on the message will become known. So if you're sending but there are situations where BCC is important, where you're trying to protect people's emails from being exposed without their permission. So, for instance, if you're sending a company newsletter, you can use BCC. But by and large, in most business communication, it's not advisable to use the BCC field. What I like to say is the smart thing to do is forward the email separately to that person who you want should read that email. Send it separately rather than mark BCC. Avoid SMS style writing. I got this message the other day. An email, can we meet today? So V was the letter V. Today was spelled to and day and followed by 7 question marks. When I read this message, I wanted to reply to that person, I don't want to meet you ever. As long as I live, I don't want to meet you because you write like this and it's pathetic. But it's terrible, this way of writing. What has happened is that in the early days of short messaging service, in the early days of mobile phones, I remember there was 32 rupees a minute that one paid for a phone call when mobiles first came in, and there was 16 rupees. So I distinctly remember. And every time you send a message, after 100 words, you were charged for the next SMS. So maybe that is the reason why people got into contractions and things like that and writing in this manner. I've never done it. I've never done it in my life, nor do I propose to. But that may have been the reason why people used contractions for SMSs. But it becomes a habit, and it's a terrible habit. So use contractions. Use of contractions is not good. Write proper sentences and full words. Avoid that SMS style, even in messaging, because it's appalling and becomes a habit. Business environment, you must always remember, is about formal writing, always, no exception. All caps. So we talked about it. It was one of our poll questions. Why no all caps? Writing in all caps is an absolute no-no because it is the equivalent of shouting. So calm down and stop shouting. Text in all caps is also difficult to read. Avoid font colors. Stick to the default color. Don't use different colored fonts. And one font that you must never use is red. Stay clear of red because it suggests either anger or suggests passion. I worked for Dell, the American company, and I know of one instance where in the US, in Austin, Texas, where the company is headquartered, one person was sacked. A senior manager, a lady, was sacked because she sent an email to her subordinate in red font, and she was sacked for doing that. So it's a big deal. It suggests you're writing in anger, so don't use red. And because red suggests anger and passion, and those are emotions that are best avoided in the workplace. If you're angry, calm down. And if you're passionate about somebody, it's good to be passionate about work in the workplace, but any other kind of passion is strictly avoidable. Avoid excessive punctuation. So when you write, "Are you sure?" followed by 3 exclamation points and 4 question marks, it's completely unnecessary, and it shows it's a sign of amateurish writing. It also reveals, sorry about my throat. It also reveals bewilderment and exasperation, and you don't want to come across as somebody who's bewildered or exasperated. And of course, it looks ugly. So, which is why you should use punctuation signs properly, and you avoid excessive punctuation. Steer clear of grammar and spelling errors. Steer clear of grammatical and spelling errors. Always spend a few minutes reviewing your email. Errors have a way of creeping into what we write, and we must spend a few minutes fixing them. Spelling mistakes can wreck even well thought out emails. And please try and go beyond Microsoft Word spell check. So I conduct writing skills programs, and I as part of my writing skills programs, I show a document of about 300 words where there are about 54 mistakes, and Microsoft Word has said it's fine, it's good to go. Spell check has happened, and you can go ahead. And there are 54 mistakes in it. So you need to go beyond Microsoft Word spell check. So just as an example there, THERE and THEIR, they're both words that are fine. Microsoft will say, no problem, go ahead. But if you've used THEIR when you should have used THERE, there is a serious problem. Avoid the high priority option. Avoid the high priority option because it is pointless. Email communication has reached a stage where if I send a mail to you right now, you'll get it in the next few seconds. So why mark it high priority? You come across as needlessly aggressive to the recipient. Also, don't use words like urgent or important in an email, particularly in the subject line, unless it's an email which is actually extremely important. So for instance, if you're working in a company and you've written to your immediate boss that you need to travel and you need to travel the next day and your travel request needs to be approved immediately for you to book your tickets, etc., then to write urgent and extremely important is perhaps okay. But use it only in exceptional circumstances, and these exceptional circumstances come maybe once a year, maybe twice a year, not more than that. So don't use high priority and don't say urgent and important in emails. There's another feature in emails, which is read receipts. They're a complete no-no. It's a no-no because read receipts are extremely irksome for the recipient. Why annoy me even before I've read your message? I may still get annoyed after I read your message, but why annoy me even before I've read it? Besides, it may not work anyway, since I may have blocked that function, or maybe my software doesn't support it. If it's critical that the recipient reads the email without delay, it's better to pick up the phone and tell me so. Say that this is an urgent email for the following reason. Can you please look at it now? Rather than a read receipt. I don't know if these read receipts still exist. In the early days of emails in the early 2000s, they were a very, very annoying feature, very widespread, and I always disabled read receipts. Don't recall messages. We talked about it earlier. Sent an email in haste, not is haste, incomplete or inappropriately worded. It happens to all of us. Do not recall the message. Chances are that your message has already been delivered and read. That's human curiosity at work. Numerous recall requests also diminish professionalism. So it's better just to send an email to say that you've made a mistake, or even better to pick up the phone if it's a serious mistake that you've made, and you don't want the person to carry the wrong impression about you. It's better to pick up the phone and apologize. There's no substitute for honesty. Owning up to a mistake raises your stature rather than diminish it. Keep questions in your email down to a minimum. What I mean by saying that is that I don't want to be subjected to an inquisition, a torrent of questions in your email. I received an email the other day which had about 5 or 6 questions. So when are we meeting? Where are we going? What is happening? And various other questions. And it felt like I'm facing interrogation. So if it's a question or a series of questions that demand a prompt response, pick up the phone, walk up to my desk and talk to me, rather than subject me to 6 questions in an email. Be appropriate with salutations. Always include a courteous greeting and closing. In their absence, an email sounds unduly curt. Address the recipient with the appropriate level of formality, but don't be overly formal. Also, when you write dear sir or dear madam, what if the person is not actually a he? Sorry. So what I mean here is that I joined Reliance Power in Bombay, and the CSR head of the company, I needed to meet her, and name was Anupam Nidhi. So you would assume that somebody whose name is Anupam is a gentleman. Turned out to be a lady. And when I had written a small mail to her, I referred to her as a he. So I said, since I'd never met the person, I said, there's some indication in my email that the person was a gentleman, not a lady. And when I met her, I was so absolutely taken aback because it was a woman I was meeting. So these are things that we need to be very careful about. In the United States, a name like Alex can be a man, Alex can be a woman. And you need to be sure about the gender of the person if you are referring to the gender of the person by saying sir or madam. Which is why it's sometimes just okay to say it, just say hi or hello without the person's name. But hey is getting too familiar. The best is to say hi Shiva or dear Venkat, to give you some current examples. You need an effective sign-off at the end of every email. Sign-off business email saying regards, best regards with your name, brings in warmth. Include a closing that mirrors the tone of your email and suits your personality. But don't say things like "can't wait to meet you" or "let's meet soon." You come across as unnecessarily aggressive and very keen to meet. I may not have either the time or the inclination to meet you, so don't suggest meetings prematurely. Include a basic signature. So at the end of an email, if there's a basic signature which has your name and your company's name, perhaps a logo of the company and your contact details, that's fine. But avoid long drawn out signatures with images and social share icons and your favorite quote. I got a mail the other day where the signature included the person's favorite quote with a very heavy graphic. And that's very annoying. And the final point in my do's and don'ts: keep emails brief and pithy. Pithy means short and to the point. This last one for me is perhaps the most important. Don't inflict long emails on recipients. Research shows an ideal email is between 50 to 150 words. Shorter the email is, the better it is. The sight of a 450-word email is very, very depressing. Every time I get an email which is that long, I truly get depressed. Keep long accounts for conversations on the phone and for face-to-face meetings. And don't let hello carry on forever. What I mean by saying that is again, to give you an example from my career, I worked for Reliance Power for 4 or 5 years. And shortly after I joined the company, I received an email from the advertising agency where the person heading our account wrote to me an email where the subject line was hello. Now, about 6 or 7 months later, we decided to change the agency, and it was time to say goodbye to this agency. But the subject line of the email was still hello. So actually, we'd reached goodbye, but the email subject line was still saying hello. So that's absurd, which is why it is useful to change subject lines. So keep emails brief and to the point and pithy. And that's about all that I wanted to say to you this afternoon. My name is Sanjeev Varma, and these are my contact details. I've greatly enjoyed interacting with you. This has been a huge audience, 600 odd people, I think. That's a huge gathering that I've spoken to. I'm sorry, but a gathering like this does not enable person-to-person sort of interaction. But I hope we'll have another occasion to meet, and they can meet one-to-one. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, Sanjeev. That's a really, really insightful and a great session. Learned a lot, from the do's and don'ts that you've shared just now. Going forward, we will open the floor to question and answers. Request everyone who has a question that you want to ask to Sanjeev directly. You can raise your hands and I can move you to panel. You can speak to Sanjeev directly, or you can also put your questions in the chat box or in the Q&A section where Sanjeev will be able to answer your questions. In the meanwhile, I'll take this opportunity to post another poll, which is a feedback poll. Request all of the participants to take just a few seconds to put in your responses to the poll. It will be really helpful for us to curate more sessions like this going forward and bring the best of the trainers like Sanjeev himself to come and speak about different topics that might be helpful, in order for you to grow professionally. Thank you so much. And we have a few raised hands, Sanjeev. With your permission, I want them to sort of ask you questions.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So Meenakshi, you're now in the panel. You can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah. Hi, Sanjeev. Firstly, I would like to thank you for giving such a wonderful session. And are you able to hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Loud and clear.
Yeah. And my question was, I'm also very particular, like how you said, I'm very fussy about not writing that short contractions and all that.
Okay.
Only question which comes into my mind every time I have to write to audience, like many of them together, is can I write hi all and hi everyone?
Hi all is okay, but the problem with writing like that is that you feel part of a herd. You kind of lose your individuality. But I think in a situation like this, when you're addressing maybe 30, 40 people together, there's no escaping it. So hi all, I think, is all right.
Yeah, because that question always comes to my mind, that hi all is something like, okay, I'm not even I'm just addressing like equally to everyone, whereas
Yes.
those could be, some of them could be with CC and some with two. So that was my question. Thanks for that. And as you said, in technical interactions on emails, there can sometimes be more than 5 to 7 of problems which has occurred, and I may have to put it in the form of points, one after the other. So avoiding red, yes, I do, but elaborating it may sometimes go beyond 450 words. So is that permissible in those situations?
See, Meenakshi, the point I was making is that ideally an email is brief communication. It's short and to the point. So research reveals that most email recipients expect to read an email which is about 50 to 150 words, maybe 200 words. Of course, there are exceptions to this rule. You could be writing about something very elaborate, in which case you cannot do it in 150 words, and you will go overboard and you will write maybe 400 words, 450, maybe even more. But the point I was making is that when I, as a busy executive, let's say I'm you're the CEO of a company, and you receive 100 emails a day, and if every mail is 450 odd words, it's going to be nightmarish for me to deal with it. Which is why it's usually good to limit yourself to about 100 odd words. There will be situations where you can't, and then it's all right. Yeah. So it's more a rule of thumb.
Thank you so much, Sanjeev.
Thanks, Sanjeev, for that answer. Thanks, Meenakshi, for asking those important questions. Sanjeev, before we move to the next participant, there's an interesting question in the chat box that I wanted to bring to your notice. Krishna from the participants is asking, how do you break bad news to a client?
How do you break bad news to a client? How do you break bad news to anybody? Really, it's one of the toughest things that you can, ever expect to do. I think the only way of doing it is being extremely polite and courteous, and yet stating it as it is, rather than trying to sugarcoat it and making it infinitely worse. So it's best to just stick to facts. Say that I'm sorry, we have to let you go, if that's what one has to convey. I think that's the way to do it. Being honest and upfront is always preferable to trying to be a little dodgy about it, and in the process actually making things infinitely worse.
Understood. Thank you so much for that answer. Vibha, if you're in the session, request you to unmute yourself and ask the question, please. Vibha Augustine.
Yeah, hello.
Hello.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, there's no such question. Actually, the session was really informative right now. So
Thank you so much, Vibha. Yeah.
Thanks, Vibha.
So usually I say in my writing skills programs that don't use very strong adjectives. Don't say, excellent and glorious and wonderful and magnificent. But when you're giving feedback to my session, you can use those adjectives.
So we have another participant who wants to ask a question. Lija John. Lija, if you're in the session, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Sanjeev. Thank you for the great session. So I have 3 questions to you. So the first one is, so if I have something to inform a person, so
as long as you don't have 6 questions, it's okay.
Okay. So this is to inform you that is that the correct way to start a email?
Okay.
This is to sorry. So if I have something to inform you, a client or someone,
okay.
So. This is to inform you that that word is a correct word to start a conversation or start a mail.
I don't particularly think you need to say this is to inform you. Just inform. Just tell me what you want to tell me, rather than say this is to inform you. This is to inform you is overly bureaucratic language. Most ministries, etc., that you deal with, they will write like this, and I think it's avoidable. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for the answer. My next question is, how to apologize? So can I start a mail with apologies? So is that the right way to use it?
I would say start by saying something, using some kind of a greeting. And in the second sentence, you can come to the point. So you can't waffle too much, but second sentence, you can apologize. You can say, I'm extremely sorry, or whatever.
Okay. Then the last question I have is I heard people saying writing in passive voice is good in actually emails. Is that correct? So do I have to use passive voice all the time?
Not really. By and large, when it comes to business communication, you must use active voice. So the difference between active and passive voice, to give you a slightly crude example, is McDonald's tagline is "I'm loving it." So if you were to say the same in a passive voice, you'll say it is being loved by me. so it sounds absurd. I mean, will you ever have a tagline which is "it is being loved by me"? You'll always say "I'm loving it." So it's by and large the rule of thumb again is that use active voice. But there are situations, and when you're talking about creative writing, when you're talking about literature, when you're talking about fiction and so on, it's full of passive. I use a lot of passive voice, but you use it in creative writing. You don't use it so much in business-oriented writing.
Okay. Thank you for your answer.
You're welcome. Thank you, Lija.
Thanks, Lija, for the questions. Thanks, Sanjeev, again for those wonderful answers. We'll move to the next participant. And before we move, Sanjeev, I have a personal question that I wanted to ask. You've seen me writing emails to you. So You know me better, I am guessing. But there is a sentence that I usually mention in my emails. It says greetings for the day, right?
Off. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you that whether it is greetings of the day or greetings, from there's another sentence that we usually use. So
Greetings of the day, not for
greetings
the
of the day. Okay,
greetings of the day. Yeah.
okay, understood. Yes, Prateek, if you're in the session, please unmute yourself and ask a question. Prateek Salvi. Anish Singh, if you're here, please unmute yourself and ask a question. Anish Singh.
Hey, Nish.
I don't have any question. I just wanted to say it's a very inciting session. So thank you, Sanjeev.
You're most welcome.
Thanks so much, Anish.
Yeah. Thank you.
Gaurav Garg, if you're here, please ask your question. Gaurav. Okay, so there are a couple of questions, Sanjeev, in the question and answer box. Just I wanted to ask them. I will read out to you. You can choose to answer them. So there's an anonymous attendee who is asking, can we use negative words like no, not, do not, etc. in our emails to higher authorities? Is there any other way around to say these words or to sort of say no?
It's difficult to provide an answer to something like this because it depends on the context. By and large, if you're writing to somebody who is more experienced than you, more senior, let's say you're writing to the chief executive of a large company, you would be courteous and maintain a decorum and not use negative words. But if the point that you have to make is that, let's say you're saying that I cannot take up this assignment, you will have to say you can't put it any other way. So, you will have to do that. But as long as you do it absolutely courteously and politely and, maintaining a certain formality, I think it's all right. But by and large, we know that, we can't speak in a certain way to people who are more experienced, and our training, the way we live our lives kind of, gives us that cue that to this person you write in this manner. So I don't know if I was able to answer the question.
So there's a question from Sri Kavi. Says, any inputs on acknowledging an email? Is it always expected? And ways to do that?
So you cannot possibly acknowledge every email that you get, but an important email that you've received, which is directly relevant to your work or to your company's reputation and status, then you should acknowledge that mail. You shouldn't. Basic point is that you shouldn't take too long to answer an email. The rule of thumb again is that while you don't reply to every email that you get instantly, you should aim to reply to an email that you've got in, let's say, 24 hours, over a 24-hour period. So if I've received it at 5 o'clock on Friday, my aim should be to reply to it in the next 24 hours. So promptness is more important. Acknowledging every email is not possible. I mean, if you receive 40, 50 emails a day, if you go around acknowledging every mail, it's going to leave you little time to do anything else.
Understood. So we have Aisha Riaz. Aisha, if you can hear me, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
I have unmuted, so I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Hi, thank you so much. It was a wonderful session, first of all. And, we realize this over a long period of time when we write the email communication, and it helps us in gradually in our experience. But the question, Sanjeev, is that at times we forget that, when we talk about business emails, we always think that it's the outside the organization communication that we're talking about. But a lot of times, the internal organization communication should also be considered as a business communication, and we should write with the right etiquettes over there also. So I just wanted to bring it up because, we spend time with everyone around in the organization, and we start writing a different tone at times.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Aisha. It's internal emails sent within a company. I've worked for very large organizations like Dell. There were about 10,000-12,000 people working for the company. Every email that you send to a person in the company is as much a business email as one that you send outside. The only thing that I like to say is that people sending internal emails shouldn't include signatures. If you and I both work for the same company, there's no particular reason why we should have a very elaborate signature at the end of it. You know me and I know you, so why go through that process? But I couldn't agree with you more that internal communication is just as important as external communication.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sanjeev.
Very good point. Yeah.
Thanks, Aisha. Thanks, Sanjeev. We'll take one last question from Akanksha. Akanksha, if you're here, please unmute yourself and ask your question. Akanksha Damani. Okay. In the meanwhile, Sanjeev, there's one question in the chat box from Reshma. It says, there are times that when we don't receive reply even after sending a reminder email. How to address to the recipient again or make them aware in a polite way that we are awaiting their response?
What the rule that I follow is that I will send one reminder or maybe two. But the third or the fourth mail that I send will be more by way of closure that, I've written to you twice, thrice. You don't seem to be particularly interested in what I have to say. So just saying that, we'll let it be. So you cannot force a person to respond to you. It's not possible. So politely, if you manage to communicate this to them, that you've written twice or thrice and have failed to draw a reply, and that's all right. That this is it. You're not going to be troubling me anymore.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Thanks so much for answering all these questions that came your way. And I think that will mark the end of the session. Thank you so much, all the participants, for coming and joining us this afternoon, being throughout the session. And, I hope you're taking away something from this session, from whatever Sanjeev had to say for the last 1.5 hours. We'll meet again in the next session. We are coming up with a very, very interesting topic on public speaking. I hope you will like it. Let's meet again next week. Sanjeev, thank you so much for doing this for us once again. The session has been wonderful. The takeaways have been brilliant, and we look forward to having you doing more and more sessions like this for us and our participants.
I look forward to that too, and many thanks, Shiva. And Venkat, is he also with us?
Yes, he's in the participants, but yeah, he's part of my team.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. All the best.